Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Anti-regime Syrians strike as massive pro-Assad rally is held in Damascus. Libya's new ruler urges NATO to stay through 2011. And Iranian workers rally in solidarity with Occupy Wall Street. Mosaic, world news from the Middle East, begins now.
The
Arab League delegation headed by Qatar arrived to Damascus from Doha to start mediation talks between the Syrian regime and the opposition. The delegation first met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. After the talks, the head of the delegation, Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jabr al-Thani, said the meeting was frank and friendly. He added that he took note of the commitment of the Syrian government to work with the committee to reach a solution. He indicated the talks will continue on October 30th.
After the Square of the Seven Fountains in Damascus and Saadallah Jabiri Square in Aleppo, the Umayyad Square was one of the Syrian capital's largest squares, holding a 1 million-person protest. The rallies were held to back Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, reject foreign interference, and support the reform campaign. Participants in the square held what they called Syria's family tree, inscribing on it, "Long live the homeland and its leader. The Syrian people are one family." The family tree was 500 meters long with the photo of President Bashar al-Assad at its center, in addition to the Syrian flag and papers with the name of Syrian citizens from several provinces who signed with their blood to express their adherence to national unity. Al-Hasaka province in northeastern Syria also witnessed a protest in President al-Assad Square in support of the national independent decision and in rejection of foreign interference. Participants also expressed appreciation for the stances of Russia and China, which supports Syria in facing the conspiracy hatched against it.
Syria is strong like the Quran and the Cross. Syria is strong because of its tribes and its intellectuals. Syria is strong because of its army. Syria is strong because of its national unity. All of Syria is strong. We will not allow foreign interference. We support the reforms. 12 million Syrians support the leader Bashar.
On the other hand, the Syrian opposition called for a general strike in statements posted on social networking sites. It confirmed it will not accept anything other than the resignation of the Syrian president and his prosecution. It added, "Arabs, do not get more involved in the bloodshed against us." In this context, the Syrian Transitional Council said the strike is the first phase of broader and larger strikes towards civil disobedience, which can topple the regime through the power of the Syrian people alone. On the ground, the head of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported the killing of 8 military personnel, including an officer. One gunman believed to be defected soldiers fired a rocket-propelled grenade on the army bus in central Syria. In addition, the observatory reported the killing of 8 people by Syrian security forces across the countryside of Idlib, Homs and its countryside, and the countryside of Damascus. On the political front, Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmed Davutoglu said what is happening in Syria is very painful. During a joint press conference with his Jordanian counterpart, Nasser Jawda in Amman, he added there is a need to end the inhumane operations against civilians.
طلب رئيس المجلس الوطني الانتقالي الليبي مصطفى عبد الجليل من حلف
Libya's National Transitional Council chief, Mustafa Abdel Jalil, urged NATO to extend its mission in Libya until the end of the year. During a meeting with NATO military commanders in Doha, Abdel Jalil said that the NTC would like to request that NATO continue its mission in order to help Libya and neighboring countries.
A cautious response quickly came from NATO headquarters in Brussels following the statement issued by Libyan NTC Finance Minister Ali al-Tarhouni, who expressed the Council's desire to extend NATO's mission in the country for at least one more month. NATO had previously announced that they plan to end military operations in Libya on October 31st. It wasn't clear whether the Libyan minister submitted an official request for NATO to extend its stay in the country.
I'm asking NATO to stay for at least an additional month.
This is how Libya appears after Gaddafi. Libya wrapped up a dark chapter of its painful history, marking the beginning of a transitional period amid uncertainty.
Everything is clear now in Libya. We are free. The Libyans are victorious and free. The tyrant lost. This is how it always ends.
Tyranny ended in Libya, and a new era has begun. May God grant Libya glory and dignity.
All Libyans know that the game has ended. Gaddafi and his son were buried after 8 months of fighting.
Our country will be 100 times better than it was under Gaddafi's reign. Our situation will improve.
In his first response to the death of Libyan Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, U.S. President Barack Obama said that Gaddafi's death sends a strong message to all authoritarian rulers around the world.
This is somebody who, for 40 years
for 40 years of terror, has ruled his country. He supported terrorism, and he had a golden opportunity to hand over power to his people peacefully.
Meanwhile, Libyan medical teams and the Red Crescent have cleared the city of Sirte of the decaying bodies from battles. Human Rights Watch confirmed the transport of 300 bodies from the city, which is still overshadowed by horrific scenes of destruction, as many areas were turned into a ghost town with no residents in sight.
A group of Iranian workers have staged a rally in the capital, Tehran, in solidarity with the Occupy Wall Street movement.
We have come here today to support the uprising of the people of the US and Europe regarding the Wall Street movement. All workers announced their support for this uprising.
The protesters gathered outside the Swiss embassy, which also functions as the U.S. interest section in Iran. They called on Washington and European governments to heed the demands of anti-corporatism protesters. The global movement against social inequality that began in the U.S. more than 1 month ago has now spread to Europe. Egypt, where a court there has jailed 2 police officers for the killing of an activist. The lawyer of Khaled Said says the court has sentenced the officers to 7 years in prison. Witnesses say 28-year-old Khaled Said died in the port city of Alexandria in June of last year after 2 plainclothes police officers dragged him out of an internet cafe and beat him. Before he died, he posted an internet video purportedly showing 2 police officers sharing the spoils of a drug bust. After his death, a Facebook site was set up in his name called We Are All Khaled Said. It played an important role in galvanizing protests that toppled Mubarak in February. Israel intends to push ahead with plans to build over 4,000 settler units in an area south of Jerusalem al-Quds. Our correspondent Hana Qassis reports from Ramallah.
According to Israeli media, Israel intends to push forward plans to build over 4,000 settlement housing units in an area south of Jerusalem al-Quds. The illegal Israeli settlements surrounding Jerusalem al-Quds have cut off the holy city from the rest of the West Bank.
This is actually one of many projects that was announced by the Israeli occupation Jerusalem municipality to change the demographic reality in Jerusalem, reducing the percentage or the number of Palestinians living in Jerusalem in front of raising the percentage of Jews living in the same city.
Several rights groups have claimed that half of the lands where the new settlement units are slated to be built are owned by Palestinians. The announcement of the plan came a week before the Quartet is due in the region to resume its peace efforts.
This is a big statement to the international community at large and to the Quartet that so far has been acting more like a one-tet rather than being a quartet. It is time that the motion of Palestine is approved at the international level, that the UN resolution is passed at the Security Council, and the Palestinians are given their rights. Without that, Israel will go unhindered.
Palestinian officials have condemned Israel's settlement plan and see it as a slap in the face face of the Quartet and the peace process. They also claim that one of the reasons for the Palestinian Authority statehood bid is to take Israel to international courts over violations of international laws.
With Palestine becoming accepted as a state now, Mr. Netanyahu will be subject to prosecution in the International Criminal Court because the International Criminal Court considers it to be a war crime if you move your own citizens into territory under belligerent occupation. So he's engaging in a rather dangerous game.
The first part of the plan includes the construction of 2,610 settlement units, followed by an additional 1,400 units. The plan for these additional and illegal settlement units was made public years ago, but the timing of the announcement, made ahead of the Quartet meeting, is what observers claim to be clear defiance of the Quartet's peace process efforts, as well as the Palestinian Authority's demands to resume negotiations. For Press TV, Hanna Kassis, occupied Ramallah.
Officials are making another attempt to jumpstart the stalled Middle East peace talks, meeting separately in Jerusalem with Israeli and Palestinian representatives over the next 2 days. The Quartet officials met first with Palestinian negotiator Saib Erekat. PA officials have repeatedly insisted that they will not return to negotiations until Israel stops all settlement activity and recognizes the 1967 lines as the basis for talks. Ahead of the meetings, U.S. State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland explained what Washington hopes the Quartet will achieve.
What we're hoping to get is a commitment by both of these parties that they will, after this meeting, move on to the next step that was in the Quartet proposal of September 23rd, namely that within 90 days they will offer each other concrete proposals on security and territory, which can form the basis for direct negotiations.
Barring any last-minute snafu, Ilan Grapel will be released tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at the Taba crossing on the Egyptian-Israeli border. The Egyptian Al-Aram newspaper today reported that heavy security preparations are already underway in the area ahead of the release. To protect against terrorist elements in the Sinai, Grapel will reportedly be transferred to Taba by a heavily armored security detail, which will also be used to take Egyptian prisoners freed by Israel back to Cairo. Grapel, who holds dual Israeli-American citizenship, has been in an Egyptian prison since June 12th on allegations of spying that were later reduced to incitement. Yesterday, Israel's Security Cabinet approved a deal for his release in exchange for freeing 22 Egyptian prisoners, most of them Bedouin from the Sinai, who have been jailed for smuggling drugs or weapons. None were convicted of killing Israelis. Al-Aram also reported that Israel tried but failed to gain the release of Israeli Bedouin Odeh Tarabin, jailed in Egypt for 11 years on spying allegations. The Grapel prisoner exchange with Egypt must still clear a required legal hurdle. MK Mikhail Ben Ami and his right-wing National Union Party petitioned the High Court today against the Grapel deal, arguing that the agreement was invalid because it was approved only by the Security Cabinet and not the entire government. The petitioners also argued that the exchange agreement is disproportionate and unreasonable, and that it differs from the Gilad Shalit deal because Grapel went to Egypt on his own free will, knowing the dangers and despite an explicit travel advisory. Later in the day, the Al-Magor Terror Victims Association also filed an appeal against the deal to the High Court of Justice. Turkey has finally accepted earthquake aid from Israel and other countries as thousands of Turks remain without shelter. The first shipment of mobile homes from Israel due to arrive in the quake-ravaged area later today. IBA's Eli Wagalanter has the story.
The first Israeli aid package, including portable homes and buildings, will arrive in the quake-ravaged area in eastern Turkey this afternoon after Ankara officially asked Jerusalem for help. Since the earthquake hit on Sunday, both President Shimon Peres and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu contacted their Turkish counterparts and offered assistance, but their offer was rejected. The Turkish government admitted today that it was struggling to cope with the demand for shelter from the homeless survivors and made a request through Israel's embassy in Ankara for Israel to send mobile homes to the devastated Van province where the earthquake hit. The Defense Ministry chartered a civilian 747 plane last night to take the mobile homes, the first of a number of planes that will be sent carrying aid. At this point, the Turks have not asked for Israeli personnel to take part in rescue and recovery efforts. Meanwhile, the latest official figures published this morning has 461 dead and 325 people injured and hospitalized. Rescuers worked hard all night, and more than 67 hours after the earthquake struck, 2 people were extracted from the rubble still alive, an 18-year-old university student and a 27-year-old English teacher who are listed in serious condition. One of the aid workers on site reported that recovery operations have ended and that there is no longer any hope of finding people alive under the rubble. The government said search and rescue teams from 45 cities and more than 200 ambulances were deployed across the disaster-struck area. For the survivors, the Turkish Red Crescent has been struggling to deliver fast enough to provide shelter for the tens of thousands of victims of the quake who have been shivering in freezing temperatures at night. Some desperate survivors fought among themselves for tents distributed by relief workers. The Red Crescent said 17 trucks carrying food, blankets, carpets, and warm clothing were looted. The government is being criticized for its lack of response and coordination to the disaster, including the lack of blankets and tents. And with snow now being predicted in the weather forecast, the government is scrambling to find relief for survivors. Ellie Wogelanter, IBA News.
Violent clashes erupted in the northern neighborhoods of the Yemeni city Taiz and many areas of the capital Sana'a. The shelling came only 1 hour after a ceasefire was reached between the Yemeni army and forces loyal to tribal leader Sheikh Sadek al-Ahmar.
Heavy shelling targeted most northern neighborhoods of the Yemeni city of Taiz. The shelling came after a truce was reached between the Yemeni army and tribal leader Sheikh Sadek al-Ahmar. But it only lasted 1 hour as clashes were renewed in the neighborhoods of Al-Hasba and Sufan of the Yemeni capital. The mediation committee that was set up to negotiate the ceasefire was assigned by President Saleh and his deputy. The committee announced the ceasefire in anticipation of ending armed clashes, removing checkpoints and barricades, evacuating gunmen from buildings and facilities, and removing all militias and armed elements from the capital. However, these hopes were dashed as clashes were renewed. Sheikh Himyar al-Ahmar, brother of Sadek al-Ahmar, clarified that the truce was not respected, not even for a single moment, referring to the shelling of houses in northern Sana'a. Eyewitnesses confirmed that machine gun fire and mortar shells were uninterrupted in the capital. In Taiz, an opposition stronghold, 8 people were killed, including a 7-year-old child, a woman, and a police officer. According to medical sources, 33 civilians were injured in the shelling and confrontations between tribesmen who joined the opposition and Saleh's forces. In Washington, the U.S. State Department said Saleh called U.S. Ambassador Gerald Firestein to inform him of the truce and his intention to sign the Gulf Cooperation Council's power transfer plan. State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland said the U.S. views these developments as positive, as President Saleh is recommitting to the Gulf Cooperation Council's agreement.
أظهرت أدلة جديدة ما يوحي بدعم باكستان لنشاط مقاتلي حركة طالبان في أفغانستان.
New evidence has surfaced that Pakistan is providing support to the Taliban in Afghanistan. A Taliban leader told the BBC that unofficial Pakistani forces are training members of the movement. In another development, a former officer of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, said that the American drone attacks on Taliban leaders in Pakistan became more effective after the CIA stopped providing early warnings to Pakistani officials. In response, Pakistan denied supporting the Taliban.
تنفي باكستان دعمها لحركة طالبان.
للمرة الأولى يماط اللثام عن علاقة.
For the first time, the mask concealing the Pakistani government-Taliban relations was removed. These fighters gained military and combat experience from the Pakistani intelligence service. A Taliban fighter said that members of the Pakistani security forces are training them in territories along the Afghan borders before fighting the Americans.
Pakistani intelligence agents used to come in their own cars at 8 a.m. and leave at 4 p.m. They trained us on using advanced weapons and how to fire shells from various areas and positions.
في صيف 2008
In the summer of 2008, Taliban activity reached its peak as its fighters launched a series of operations against various targets. Najib talked about using his skills, which he acquired from the Pakistani intelligence agency, in the fight against Americans.
وصلت الدبابات وكنا قد حضرنا الكمين.
The tanks arrived. We set up an ambush. After the first and the second tanks passed, I opened fire on the third tank. The tank erupted in flames, then exploded, killing everyone on board. We were able to get away.
الاعتراف من طالبان نفسها جاء ليدعم
This Taliban fighter's assertion supports the suspicions and claims cited by the US against Islamabad. Washington expressed confidence that Pakistani security agencies harbored the perpetrators of the Mumbai attacks. The US also accused Pakistan of adopting a double standard policy in Afghanistan.
تتبع أيضا في أفغانستان.
Our own intelligence was unequivocal in Afghanistan. The Pakistani intelligence agency not only turned a blind eye to the insurgency there, but provides support to the insurgents. At the beginning of drone operations, we gave Pakistan an advance tip-off of where we're going, and every single time, the target wasn't there anymore.
Despite statements issued by former Pakistani security officials on the importance of a collaboration along the border, Islamabad has rejected the accusations. Islamabad is fighting the Taliban on its soil in an attempt to limit its influence and restrain its activities aimed at expanding Taliban control of territories along the Afghan border.
All the facts on the ground, the evidences.
All the facts and evidence on the ground refute the claims against Pakistan and its intelligence agency, which are being accused of providing material support, arms, and a safe haven to armed groups.
Providing them material support.
The Americans also held the Pakistanis responsible for the recent attack on the US embassy in Kabul. The US has demanded that Pakistan adopt a more rigid strategy in dealing with the Taliban. They accused the Pakistani army of protecting armed Taliban fighters along the Pakistan-Afghan border, as well as providing the fighters with instructions to cross the borders while evading the international forces. Here, the US is faced with a dilemma of supporting its allies in the so-called war on terror, while the allies are supposedly supporting those accused of committing acts of terror against Americans and their interests.
Media sources announced the departure of the last U.S. soldier from the Wasit and Diyala provinces, as stipulated by the framework withdrawal agreement signed between Baghdad and Washington. The sources quoted military leaders in Wasit saying that the Iraqi Air Force Command Center received all security installations of the Delta military base from the U.S. military, which completed transporting its personnel and equipment outside the country. In another development, Diyala Governor Abd Nasser al-Makdawi announced the withdrawal of the last U.S. soldiers deployed in the Baladrus, Khalis, and Miqdadiya counties. Al-Makdawi confirmed that plans were being drafted to counter the security challenges in the upcoming phase.
With the year-end U.S. troop withdrawal approaching, fears are mounting over the possibility that the withdrawal may cause a logistical and information void in the country. However, Iraqi parliamentarians have stressed the importance of implementing the withdrawal as planned, saying it's a popular decision and that Iraqis are capable of facing the upcoming challenges. Meanwhile, observers confirmed that the American side is mandated by the security agreement signed with Baghdad to help protect Iraq and its airspace. Ahmad al-Zaidi has the details.
485 U.S. bases have been handed over to the Iraqi forces, leaving 20 bases scattered across the country to be handed over by the end of the year. However, fears are mounting that the long-awaited withdrawal may likely leave behind a logistic and information void in the country. Iraqi members of parliament stress the importance of implementing the withdrawal, saying that the Iraqi people are capable of facing the upcoming challenges.
The U.S. forces overstay in Iraq does not mean security. It means deterioration and indicates that Iraqi forces are not ready. The withdrawal of the occupied forces from Iraq means the Iraqi forces are ready and capable of taking over the security file.
Political analysts confirm that the U.S. government is mandated to provide logistical and intelligence support, as well as to help protect Iraq's borders and airspace, in accordance with the security agreement signed with Iraq.
بدعم العراق.
I
believe the agreement or articles of the framework agreement made reference to these points. The framework agreement doesn't only address the military issue. Yes, there will be forces remaining for training purposes as stipulated by articles of the agreement, but there are security benchmarks that the American side is responsible for, which will help both sides maintain relations after the withdrawal. The framework agreement also addresses other political, economic, and cultural aspects, including the logistical support for the political process, as specified by the agreement's articles.
Fears are mounting over the Iraqi forces' readiness and capability of maintaining security and infiltrating terror networks. This is what is on everyone's mind. By interpreting the political and security status quo in the country, one can conclude that the Iraqi government will face logistical and informational challenges pending the implementation of the security agreement. For Farad Channel, Ahmad Al-Zaidi, Baghdad.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.